I wanted to take a few minutes and jump through the AWU story because it's not going away. The Financial Review today, as part of its editorial, was saying that there are questions to be answered. Last week, the line was there are questions to be answered. When Parliament goes back next week, I'm hearing that bits of paper will be thrown around and will that mean there are more questions to be answered? So let's actually try and go through some of the questions that still need to be answered. Now, before I get into the specifics of all of those, Chris, you wrote something along those lines over the weekend in the Weekend Australian. Put simply, what is the fundamental point of this story? Do you believe that it's about illegal actions, improper actions? Is it about her judgment? Because to me, if it's about her judgment, do we really need to pore over all of the documents and all of the carry-on to prove that somebody has bad judgment who literally 2 years ago lied in this very city about the carbon tax? Do we have to go back that far to prove it?
Look, it's about the Prime Minister's professional reputation and professional standards, but just before she went into politics. It's about how truthfully and transparently and honestly she's dealt with those issues subsequently in politics. And of course there are these issues of legality, because not directly linking it to the Prime Minister, but of course the entity that she helped establish, the slush fund, as she has called it in the past, that she helped to establish, was used for fraudulent purposes by whom? By her lover at the time. So obviously the Prime Minister is linked into a horrible scandal of union corruption here. No one questions that. It's the extent to which she was involved in what she did about it. And I think that's the critical point from here on. She wants to shut it down. She's spent her whole political life trying to suppress any debate or questioning of this issue. She's gone to extraordinary lengths this year to intimidate and threaten media to try and drop this story. She does not want to answer the questions. Now, if there's nothing that she's worried about here, then she should just answer these questions and move on. But it will be pursued. I think the point of my article on the weekend was just that it has become a mainstream political issue, if you like, in that what was being investigated only by The Australian is now being seriously investigated by the Fairfax Press, the Age newspaper, by a former national editor of the Age, and also by the Australian Financial Review. And of course the opposition has now taken it up. They left it alone for a long while, but Julie Bishop has been taking it up, and she's determined to keep pursuing this in a forensic way.
But Janine, I mean, you and I share a very similar view of all of this, which is, look, when we get to the smoking gun, great, let's do the full hour on the show and let's call for everyone to resign and all the rest of it. But again, and we spoke to Peter Reith last week and he said that all of this is about the judgment. Chris just said it's all about the judgment. Do we need to go back 15, 17 years to prove that she had bad judgment? Because to me, the reason we're going back to all of this and everyone's waving documents around is to create the perception that the Prime Minister is corrupt. Remember, that's what the Liberal MP called out in the Parliament, and that is a very big thing to say. And even the people who are desperately hoping that this is all going to go their way, they're not willing to front up and say that's what the whole point of this is.
Oh, Paul, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, at the risk of upsetting the whack jobs on the internet and the Twitter nutters that are out there on the other extreme, if you dare to not, jump on the conspiracy theory, I have always said I'm agnostic on this. If you come up with some smoking gun, some evidence of corruption, something I can understand, be it a quarter of a century later, that is worth all this, I'm happy to look. I haven't seen it, and I'm sorry, Chris, I read your article the weekend and still thought, what is the point? Just because other journalists are writing about it in the mainstream and Julie Bishop is picking it up, it still hasn't convinced me. If there's something there, show us. It's been a long time and a lot of breath wasted and a lot of trees killed for it. Show me something and I'm fine. But it's like inside the Beltway, a group of journalists just pushing each other to keep doing it to justify what they're doing. We're in danger of becoming like, you're in danger of the Australian of becoming like Fox in the US, that you go so far. The great mass of people out there don't understand, don't care. Show them something if you've got it.
The Australian Financial Review is editorialising today, saying there are questions to be answered.
Right, so that's it. Most of the time your paper criticises the Financial Review as being a joke, but when they're on your side,
why are you so upset about transparency?
I'm sick of it. It's not transparency, it's just pushing and pushing something.
Well, Chris, let's go to the two matters you've mentioned. You haven't mentioned the Australian, you've mentioned the Financial Review and the Age.
No, I mentioned the Australian.
The Financial Review, no, in your comments just then, the Financial Review had an extensive piece on the weekend which concluded that Gillard didn't do the conveyancing for the property in Melbourne, and concluded that someone else in another division of the firm did the conveyancing, and that the allegation that you and Julie Bishop have been making about the cheque, the conclusion there in the Financial Review was that it was unlikely anyone in the firm saw the cheque because it was deposited in the Perth bank account and was electronically transferred over to Melbourne. So Gillard not working on the conveyancing, it's extremely unlikely that she saw the cheque. So you talk about questions and you talk about investigations. There's one matter cleared up.
Well,
by the source, no, I didn't interrupt you. By the source that you cited. By the source that you cited. You mentioned Mark Baker in The Age. He wrote a piece saying there was a letter, I don't think it's inconsistent with what Gillard said about the nature of her legal advice, a letter to the WA Corporate Affairs Commission regarding the registration of the association, where he talks about the file is believed to contain a copy of the letter. The Commission is understood to have written. It is believed the Commission objected. So no sources even alluded to in this article, and then we find out the letter he's talking about doesn't exist at Slater and Gordon, is not held by the WA archives, and there's no evidence of it on the public record. I spoke to Mark Baker today, your source, your authority.
No, it's not my source, Mark.
No, you cited him. I didn't interrupt you.
Are you going to read newspapers all night, or are we going to have a chat about this?
Well, no, you cited newspapers. No. You're a Liberal who's trying to do in Gillard. No, you're putting out the general smear that she's got questions to answer and things have happened that are wrong. You've cited sources that don't support your argument. They don't support your argument. I spoke to Mark Baker today and he said he's got an impeccable source. I said, well, if your source is so reliable, why not allude to him in your newspaper report? He said, sometimes things are done in different ways, which quite frankly is a pathetic response.
Well, you can take
now,
that up
for
with
you
him, Mark.
to cite these people,
I think the
as part of your smear,
I think the point
you
Hold on a minute. I am the
discredited. You are discredited
I am the
by the failure of your own people.
I'm not doing well here, Paul.
Mark,
sorry, just let Paul stop. Just for 1 second.
Just
for 1 second. Paul's not here. Just let Paul.
I am making
Hold on a
allegations against
second,
you.
please,
This
guys.
is a
Let
Liberal
Paul
smear
come in
against
here,
Julia
Paul.
Gillard. And you're
Paul.
part of it.
Now,
Paul.
As a senior
Enough, guys.
former
Paul.
Liberal staff,
Okay,
you're part of it.
I'm giving
this
up
is not
here, Paul.
independent journalism. I am making allegations against you, pal. You're into this up to your neck, and you're wrong.
All right, now, I want to ask you, Chris, because there's a few things to unpack in all of this. Now, guys, obviously the technology of where we are right now is that it's hard for us all to talk at once. So there's a few things there. Chris, do you want to respond to what Mark's just said, and then we'll move through some of the stuff?
Look, I absolutely want to respond to that. I mean, that gets to the heart of what we're on about here. He's trying to make it some sort of partisan game. He wants to defend Julia Gillard and the Labor Party. That's fine. The point I want to talk about here is transparency and accountability. I've done very little reporting on this myself. I wrote a column about it on the weekend. The Australian's Hedley Thomas has written a series of reports about this, which have all been based on documentary evidence. Now, my issue here is the voters, the public. The public deserve to know. There should be full accountability and transparency. And simply, there are questions to be asked. Now, the questions have been published in the Australian newspaper. They've been published in the Australian Financial Review and The Age. Journalists ask them at press conferences. The Prime Minister does not want to answer. Now, the Prime Minister can do that. She can keep stonewalling on this all she likes, but people will not stop asking her. Because the public deserves to hear an answer.
Well, I've got a question for Chris. Chris, do you accept the findings of the report you cited earlier on by Tingle and Scully in the AFR, that Gillard is not responsible for the conveyancing in that firm?
I don't accept any responsibility for journalists at the Australian Financial Review. What I do say is that Julia Gillard needs to answer some critical questions, and perhaps the most important. There are many, as you know. You can delve into the weeds all you like.
She hasn't answered.
I think the one that is most important is why she did not, or it seems she did not. If she did, she should tell us, but if she didn't, she should explain why not. Why she did not relay to the Australian Workers' Union or the police what she knew about this slush fund that she'd helped to establish. Why, when she found out that untoward things were going on and she had to leave the law firm, why did she not tell the union or the police?
Well, she'd broken up with Wilson, and I know these flint-hearted right-wingers would think you break up with someone plus you dob them into the police. But in a circumstance where Gillard... you've asked the question, I'm answering it. In a circumstance where the firm had conducted the interview in September 95 and was obviously aware of these matters, in a circumstance where it was incumbent upon Tees, which contributed the money, to cooperate with the police inquiry, they didn't. They didn't. You see, the matter you're talking about in the legal system in Australia has no standing in terms of proven wrongdoing. Now, you and I might agree that there is a difficulty.
It's very simple here, mate. It's very simple. You don't want to hear answers. I think the public deserve answers.
I'm giving you the answer.
Step in there?
I just think it's unreasonable.
Janine, everyone, get out of the way and let Janine talk.
I just wanted to say to you, this is a perfect example to me, and I'm not taking sides on either one. You both put the case very stridently, but I still, and I wouldn't class myself as stupid, and I understand most things. I find this very complex. As I said, I'm in the middle like you, and I'm listening to this, and I hear this from both sides, and they both say, but I am totally and utterly still confused, and I'm not sure that the public has any greater understanding or appreciation, despite all this that's being written. Wouldn't you agree?
Okay.
I'm too
Now,
I'm sorry, I was just asking
What you
Paul
need to understand is the question of human decency, because Chris is the sort of person who's recommending that when you break up with a partner, you also dob them into the police. Now, I don't know how you were brought up, and I don't know your standards in life, but that's not how I was brought up, and it's not something that I think your average decent Australian would regard as an acceptable recommendation.
That's a silly
dobbing him into the police after you've broken up a relationship.
I think we're getting off the track
Well, I
here,
just
Paul.
think, in terms of human decency, he's revealed what sort of person he is and what this is all about. It's a flint-hearted Liberals trying to get at Gillard, where you couldn't get out over Thompson and the hung parliament and bring the government down that way. What they're now saying about Gillard is break up with the partner and dob him into the police. Well, it shows what sort of people they are.
Well, Mark, you're being very silly.
Boys,
Please.
Paul,
You go, Paul. I'll respond when I get a chance.
Cool. All right, just give me a second to host my own show, just for one little second here. Now, I just want to ask. I want to ask Mark, not about Chris, but just. You have sat on the same set in that same chair, and we have spoken very critically of Julia Gillard, very critically of the government. It's fair to say that we had pretty direct conversations during the 2010 election campaign that some people want to pretend was part of the reason that they lost. So it's not like you're new to defending Julia Gillard, but about Julia Gillard and about this story, why don't you believe, or why can't you take the same leaps that other people seem to, in their absolute bone marrow, believe something's there?
Well, I judge things independently. I look at each issue and matter that comes before us on this show and make an objective judgment about what's right and what's wrong. I was very strong in criticising the Labor Party about the Craig Thompson affair, very strong in criticising Kevin Rudd during the last election campaign. I'm not beholden to any party or faction or interest, and I judge these things objectively. The idea that you're part of a team, you see Chris is part of the Liberal Party team, that you're part of a team and whether Gillard solves cancer or saves the world from poverty or does something to stop global warming, she's automatically wrong, I just find totally ignorant and unacceptable. The public deserve an independent, objective assessment. I've not heard anything from Chris tonight. I've not read anything in the acres of newsprint, in the Australian and other publications that provides any hard evidence on this question of ancient history that would make me think less of the Prime Minister. So that's my conclusion based on the facts, independently, objectively, and the fact that I'm not part of a cheer squad for the Liberal Party on this or for the Labor Party just means that I think I'm doing the right thing in terms of public opinion.
All right, now, Chris, I've got to go to a break here, but there's now you can choose one of two parts to finish off here. One, you can talk about how you're not part of the Liberal Party cheer squad, or two, that thing of what is the one unsolved mystery, the thing that makes you return to this as frequently as you do, as something saying, hang on, there is something here.
Well, Paul, I've written one column about it, and I'm happy to talk about it as a Sky News presenter while it's a political issue, because we still haven't got the answers as to why the Prime Minister didn't act when she knew what was going on. Now, Mark here has shown what's going on. You know, he likes to be the Labor Party bother boy. He's throwing personal insults at me, but the simple matter is this, that people in the media try and cut through the spin and the obfuscation and get to the heart of a matter in the public interest. Now, the public has every right to know about these these issues because they go to the character of the Prime Minister and her standards professionally before she went into politics and her honesty now. Now, that's what journalists do. There are a number of fine journalists pursuing this. Not me. I don't pursue it day in and day out. I wouldn't want to take the glory from the people who are doing the hard work. But they are finding evidence here and trying to ask questions. They will not get answers from the Prime Minister. I think the Prime Minister should actually just answer the questions. It's as simple as that, because that's what the public are entitled to.